Hello, and welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia, and welcome to the Great Famine Voices Roadshow. My name is Adam Feldman. I'm a librarian here at the Free Library, and my particular role, I'm called the library coordinator for the Central Library. My role is to help all of the various departments here, whether it's history or music or art or literature, work together to present public programs. So when Strokestown Park reached out to us about the idea of hosting the Great Famine Roadshow in Philadelphia, I was thrilled with the idea of bringing it on. In fact, since it covered memory and literature and history, I thought it was fair for me to take it on myself and organize the details of making it happen here. And we've just completed a fantastic afternoon of storytelling and lectures to an audience. And I think we got very much exactly what I would hope we would get in Philadelphia, which was very diverse, multi-ethnic, multiracial crowd of people. Some who came because they heard about the event and some who just stumbled upon it. And the Irish famine story connects with the stories of so many immigrants and migrants to Philadelphia, both since foundation until contemporary days as we integrate new refugees into Philadelphia. And I'm sitting before the camera now too because I had some personal interest in this as well. I should say I sometimes jokingly identify as a Celtic Jew. My mother's mother was French, from Brittany. In fact, was a Breton speaker, a Celtic speaker in her childhood. And my maternal grandmother, this Breton speaker, married an Irish-American GI from Philadelphia at the end of the Second World War, and they moved back to Philadelphia and had their child, my mother. Francis Cassidy, my Irish American grandfather, his grandparents were immigrants to Philadelphia as a result of the Great Famine. And I get the sense that not very many stories from that great grandparents generation made it to Frank Cassidy. He certainly didn't talk about the famine. However, my mother was fascinated with her grandparents, who were, only one generation away, and she definitely drew out a lot of family stories, but none of them touch on that moment of departure. In fact, they kind of mostly covered survival in Philadelphia in the Great Depression in the U.S., and frankly, one of the strangest survival stories that I heard from her, my grandfather was the oldest child. One of the younger children was born with a form of mental retardation and other physical disabilities that made consuming solid food very hard. And during Prohibition in the United States and during Depression, the family lore that was passed down was that the grandparents brewed beer for food to keep this child alive. All of us have had a hard time sort of decoding what that meant. Was this a form of gruel? Was it just cooked oats? What was it? But this was like a survival strategy to feed a child who was hard to feed. I think the other thing that strikes me about Irish American identity as part of like a diaspora in the United States was, when I introduced myself as a Celtic Jew, my father's Jewish. His family, my grandmother, all my grandparents on his side were the firstborn in the United States. All fleeing the Pale of Settlement, Lithuania, fleeing pogroms before the Holocaust started. I very much in the United States grew up strongly identifying as Jewish, but when my parents separated, I ended up going to a Catholic school. And in Philadelphia, in Catholic schools, I think there's a very strong maintenance of like a white ethnicity. It was very clear in school who were the Irish descended children, who were the Italian descended children, who the Jews were, and who the blacks were. Was like sort of our like kind of racial cultural hierarchy. And I was easily identifiable as a Jew because my name is Adam Feldman. Our last names were like the main key to like what categories we fit in. But because of this Irish and French or Breton heritage, I sometimes tried to ally myself with the Irish kids for like sort of protection or allegiance to not be like such a small minority in the school. And Irish American cultural identity is in my adulthood. It's like kind of insane. Some of the things that I felt like we held up as precious. You know, when St. Patrick's Day came around, schools would often at school we'd often have like a lot of like Irish cultural food products that were not. They were very local to Philadelphia. There's something called the Irish potato, which is a candy. It might be like somewhere on the consistency of marzipan, made with coconut. Very much not an Irish food, but has become like, at least at the elementary level or in like childhood, like a kind of a symbol of like, this is the way we celebrate St. Patrick's Day with this candy. And, you know, I think it might have even been sort of reclaiming a derogatory term like the potato famine. The Irish starved because of their dependence on potatoes, or the lure of potatoes as like the foodstuff of the Irish was everywhere. So this candy kind of like, you know, was a candy of abundance thrown back against the stereotypes. And, you know, as a teenager, other ways I formed my identity, I was really into punk rock, and sort of like Boston is famous for its like large Irish American community, but the Boston punk bands that came out of that often like to nod towards like bagpipes or Irish whistles and other kinds of traditional Irish melody. And sometimes nostalgically, I find myself tear up a little bit when I hear those songs that reference Irish culture, or even more presently, the Pogues, like meant a lot to me as a teenager, where a lot of my identity was formed in sort of like, I'm Irish, I'm Jewish, I'm not French, but Breton. Like, I come from all these oppressed peoples who have made a home in the United States. And I think it's definitely made me feel a allegiance towards the battle against oppression, or to the cultural, political imperative to welcome anyone into like a democratic culture. And I think that's one of the messages that today's lecture in Philadelphia, I was very pleased to see that come out. The way so many institutions in the United States built by the Irish, or the contemporary Irish Immigration Center in Upper Darby is not only serving Irish emigres who come in the past generation or two, but is serving Philadelphia's enormously large group of immigrants from every continent that's inhabited. It's nice to see memory serve as a reminder to do what's right.